So, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and why you are here today?
Well, thank you very much. I'm very delighted to be here. I'm Susan Smith Nash, and I'm here from Oklahoma. I'm the guest of Evald Flisar, who is managing editor of Sodobnost, and I'm also here, and I'm happy to introduce Jana Bauer, who is also a Sodobnost. And it's really, I'm here because I love Slovenian literature. I will say that. And I'm here because I really believe in supporting Slovenian literature in my role as managing editor of Texture Press. I'm happy to say that it's been 14 years since my very first trip to Slovenia, and in that first experience, I had the opportunity to really have a chance to see what Slovenian literature was like, because I participated in Villanica in a festival, literary festival, and I was immediately struck by the intelligence and the realm and range of Slovenian literature. So I've made it something of a mission to try to make Slovenian literature available in English, thanks in large part to the Slovenian, to Evald and his efforts to make things available, also to the Slovenian government and the Trubar Foundation, and also to the enthusiasm and efforts of authors in Slovenia, and to the dedicated work of dedicated translators, which is not easy, because going either from English into Slovenian or Slovene into English, it's a challenge, and it depends on the audience, and many times I've been trying to make things accessible to American audience, because my goal is really to see Slovenian literature made very popular in the US. So I would like to ask the audience if there are any, what your favorite authors are in the US. When you think of American authors, what are the authors that come to mind? You think of say, Mark Twain. Do you read Mark Twain? How about Whitman, Emerson? It's interesting to me that many of the early authors that come to mind in audiences outside the U.S. are those that are made available in translation and made free. And so another reason I'm here is I'd like to convince a few Slovenian authors to make their work available in English, at least in certain part, in open access and free. And I'd like to help with that as well. It's because I think that the more that things are available free, the more people will obviously read them and download them.
And the more authors starve.
Well, that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned that. And you would think that authors would starve if things are free. And that's been a lot of the major complaint in intellectual property. But you yourself mentioned to you that you were thrilled that Google stole your book.
But that's a different thing, because there was a collection of plays, and plays in book form don't sell at all, whereas if they are freely available on the net, then some artistic directors around the world can read them, and every now and then they send an offer which the author cannot refuse. So I'm very grateful to Google for stealing the book, yes, and no doubt you are not suffering any great damage because of that either. So let's hope that they will continue to steal my plays published by Texture Press, and that I will keep getting offers from around the world. Thank you very much.
Well, and I will say, like, for example, the works that I've made available through Texture Press that have been made available for free, okay, I will say that maybe they have a shelf life because they may have to do with like instructional design and technology. But there are a few that I've made available, and I will not say that they have triggered a lot of sales, for example, one has been downloaded about 20,000 times. So I thought, oh great, this is wonderful. I'll charge $5 for the thing. Well, so I thought, okay, that'll be good. People will be willing to pay $5. Well, no, the downloads went to 0. So I thought, okay, I will charge $1. Same thing, 0. So, okay, what am I doing wrong? Then I realized, okay, it's not about the sales, it's about the power of ideas, and also about what I can do to keep myself dynamic, and then it actually made people contact me for things that I could do that were personalized. So maybe it turned into just sort of advertising, but at the same time, I like to think that it stimulated thought and stimulated intellectual transfer of knowledge. And to me, that's what it's about. And I look at books now, and I think of them as potentially triggers of transfer of knowledge, and not as a static thing anymore. But I'm not sure exactly what form that would take. I think we're still trying to figure that out. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I am fascinated by many things about you. You have a PhD in literature, here you would be called Doctor of Literarnih znanosti in nekaj takega. But then you started off as a geologist, and after that you studied economy and instructional design. I still don't know what that is.
Me either.
And now you travel the world lecturing on all sorts of subjects. So how many of you are there? Are you the only Susan Smith Nash, or do you have doubles?
I feel really fortunate that I live in a time where I can be kind of a schizoid self. But then other times I feel like not very good about it because I've had to reinvent myself. So I have to say I did start out as a geologist, but and I was a petroleum geologist. And I graduated in a time of extreme boom times. I was inspired by my dad. My dad's a geologist, and he seemed to have a really fascinating and exotic life. And I'm like, oh, I want that. And so I was like, oh, this is great. And it was okay for a year or two until the price collapsed to like $8 a barrel, and the oil and gas leases or permits that I had invested in, like they were all valid for a period of time. They all expired, so all of my earnings went. And so I thought, well, this was not very much fun. But on the other hand, I was in my early 20s, and I had the opportunity to be successful in a certain monetary way.
And you thought there was more money in literature, so yeah.
right, no, yeah. So I decided to study economics and economic development and understand things. And then also there was a side of me that was like, how do I understand all this? So I was drawn to literature as a way of understanding myself and understanding the world. I don't think that I had any grand design to make a lot of money, but I did enjoy the opening up of the self that studying literature gave me, and it gave me the ability to transform because it gave me that sort of that field or that open space of ideas that it's really where I think the transformational potential comes from. And so you open up all these windows and that things can flow into you, and you can hopefully transform, but I don't think you can transform in a vacuum. I think you have to talk to people, you have to interact with them, you have to listen to see how you can be beneficial and how they can be beneficial, and interact in something that is forward thinking, and then coming up with some kind of vision or mission that you can concretize and make action steps about. And even as I'm saying this, I know this sounds really positivistic and American, and I partly believe it, but then at the same time I know that it can collapse in and on itself at any moment. So I don't know. I feel overall very optimistic about the ability to have multiple selves. At the same time, I know it's difficult, and that there is a certain nihilistic element that does sort of have that sort of thanatos, self-destruction element in it, which sometimes is scary, but maybe potentially a good thing. I don't know.
Well, we on this side of the Atlantic tend to be more pessimistic and increasingly so. But you also received 2 awards for poetry, I think, Gertrude Stein awards. So, do you still write poems?
Well, it's a difficult question.
Or was that during your while you studied economy that you were writing?
I love to write poetry, and I'm sometimes inspired again. I love, especially 20th century futurist poetry and experimental poetry, and I'm a huge admirer of Kosovel. I love his work, and he inspires me to write again, because I love the way that you can play with language and have levels and multiple levels of meaning. But the thing about poetry is that I find that poetry is easier for me to write if I'm in a quiet space and I'm not having to push myself to transform. And I write prose when I'm trying to process and create some kind of discourse of explanation. I pull it all together, or make it all together, or I question. So when I have like a lot of chatter in my head, I can write prose, but not poetry.
And what sort of frame of mind do you have to be in to write essays?
Essays, deadlines.
Deadlines, yes.
It depends. Usually those are so straightforward and structured that often they have to be for a specific purpose. So I usually have to have a kind of strict deadline and a clear idea of the audience and a clear reason, like why.
So what else would you like me to ask you?
I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Oh no, please don't. I have no answers.
Well, I just,
you should point out that you're also here because...
okay, I'm here because of random thoughts. And I want to say thank you for having the opportunity to talk about the book that is coming out in Slovenian version. In English, it's called Road Trip of the Mind. And it grew out of a number of sort of longer essays that were more or less made into a sort of fragmentary form which the idea is to make it more of a mosaic and to create and precipitate thought. And it grew out of years of thought because I've developed a course that's called Road Trip of the Mind. And it's taken, I teach it online, the University of Oklahoma, and it consists of a number of units where students are asked to read philosophical writing, a lot of deconstructivist thinkers, a lot of Baudrillard and Guy Debord and the idea of spectacle, and then also some poetry and prose, and then connect it to things that are happening in their lives. So the idea is to make a kind of pastiche or mosaic, but to break apart narrative flow and to reconsider and reperceive things. So the idea is to reperceive and reform consciousness. I will say that I don't think that I successfully reconfigure consciousness with this collection of works, but at least I hope I trigger thoughts, and that maybe somebody else can start to reconfigure consciousness in a certain way that breaks open assumptions, interrogates underlying assumptions, values, and leaves them open for examination. And again, I like the idea of transformations. I think it starts by having to break things open, break things down. And that includes narrative structures, everything else.
Yeah, in this book you talk about 4 industrial revolutions. Now we know about the 3 that have happened already. The digital one was the last one. But tell us about the 4th one, because we are still waiting for that.
I think we're right on the verge of it. I think the 4th industrial revolution will take place when we focus on looking at all the destructive things that we've done, all the contamination, and all the aquifers we've contaminated, all the byproducts of production, all the say, wastewater and the, say, saltwater production from hydraulic fracturing, from new technologies, and it will come with being able to economically transform those into pristine resources, so we can rebuild the earth with those pristine resources. So what I'd like to see really, oh no, this is being filmed, I forgot about this. Okay, okay, we can edit it out if it's too crazy. I'd like to see massive machinery being able to reconfigure atoms and things, not to make fusion or fission and to make destructive things, but to train. I mean, it's like an alchemy dream, but gone to like beautiful resources that we can use, like restore things to their pristine nature. So water would be number 1, and air would be another one. And then all the icky stuff that we are collecting in filters and all that, just go poof, and turn it into something good. And I'd like to be able to do that. It sounds like magic, but I mean, doesn't all technology actually look like magic at one point? And when in layman's terms really is, I mean, flying. So I believe it's possible, but it'll have to happen on probably atomic levels. Now what it'll do to the human body, and of course the unintended consequences, that's another philosophical ramification, and I'm sure it will be misused. But that's what I hope to be a 4th industrial revolution.
And how big do you think the chances are that it will actually happen?
I think we're on the verge.
It sounds like a dream.
It does, but I think I would bet that within 10 years we're at least able to turn some of the things, starting with water. We could start to look at, say, produced water from oil and gas. Right now there's a horrible drought in California. At the same time, there's a lot of produced water from oil and gas operations that right now they're just re-injecting back into the earth, causes aquifer contamination, it causes earthquakes, all kinds of bad things, and it doesn't do a thing to help restore water. So how about finding an economic way to use solar energy, thermal energy, to clean up the water and use it at least for surface water, and to use it for crops, but making sure that it's clean, that it won't have some hideous, radioactive thing in it, or some heavy metal, like, no arsenic needed here. But I mean, I think that's where I'd like to see it start. And I know we're really on the verge there, because I became obsessed with this idea and worked with the organization I work with, and we put together a couple of workshops and conferences on water resources, and there are many others going on, and there are innovative processes. The big complaint is that it's not economic. So I think we're right at the verge. If we can make it affordable enough, it will happen. And that would be like a baby step along the way, because I think it's a mindset. Once we start turning contamination into good things, then we are really, really turning the corner.
Well, I think that you have convinced the jury, and the prosecutor has no further questions.
Thank you. Any questions from anybody in the audience?
Matthew?
So, no, well, I want to say I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and I think that important for the world to really get to know Slovenian literature and Slovenian thought. I think that Slovenia is in a unique position as a crossroads country, and I don't really believe that a lot of people understand that or are aware of the complexity of thoughts. It's probably, this is just an outside looking in perspective, but as I see Slovenia as such a crossroads and blending and intermeshing of thoughts and ideas that it must be confusing to be here at times. It might think like, well, okay, we're just caught up in different ideas, there's a lot of cacophony and different voices, and it doesn't really come across as a unified whole. But that's the beauty of being a crossroads culture, is that you have the opportunity to like pull apart all those different threads, and each one has its incredible value, and then touch that thread to some other part of the world and see it resonate and electrify people. And again, I mean, this is one thing I really admire about your work. Your work has been translated, and it's you're frowning, but it's so true. That it's in 143 different works and languages translated. It's performed, and they bring to it their own context and their own perspective, and it's unexpected from perhaps the author's perspective. So the Slovenian authors and writers and thinkers don't have any idea how you will electrify somebody outside, but it's important, and I know that it's part of the key to this sort of synthesis of ideas that could lead to a better world.
You see, the reason this doesn't happen very often is, if I may return to your brother's call an hour ago. Your brother called you from the States, and it took you almost half an hour to explain to him where you were. And that you are not in a dangerous place, and that you will come back safe and alive and so on. That is the problem. The world does not know who we are, where we are, what we are like, and those who do discover us and walk away with
I have to say,
mostly very good impressions.
True, but I'm embarrassed. I will say I was sad that my brother is rather geographically challenged, but...
Isn't that a general American problem?
Yes. And I don't even understand it, because only last summer he and his family were driving across Europe, so I don't really understand that. But when I say former Yugoslavia, he kind of got it. And then when I said between Austria and Italy, he understood it. But that's all. So I mean, I think that's part of the task I feel that's a big job to make all Americans know geography. But it's we can start, we can try.
But we have world champions, skiing champions, boxing champions, you name it. We have world famous opera singers. We have, as you said yourself, writers translated into any number of languages. What else can we do to make the world aware of our existence? Should we start a war, perhaps? Because during the war, everybody was talking about Slovenia.
Well, I think that's been tried before, wasn't it? But that was just a few miles down the road in World War I.
Yeah.
That works for a while, but it's messy. I've thought about this, and I thought, okay, scandal. But though there's so many scandals, and as we discussed earlier, that's the strategy. That's like, there's so many scandals. Which scandal do you do? Maybe developing a Kim Kardashian type of person, but then that won't really have people think about ideas. So that's counterproductive. So that's good for a think tank. I would.
Maybe we could achieve world fame by the number of ministers who have to resign or sacked and so on, because in this particular field, I think we are quite an exception.
Well, it's impressive.
It's a good start.
It's a good start, yes.
Well, we could go on forever, but I think it's probably time to, if it goes on YouTube, I hope I'll be cut out.
Well, I want to say thank you, and this is taking place at the University of Ljubljana, and it's in philosophy department, and here's a nice logo in a bag from the bookstore, and I want to thank the bookstore for very nice gift, and also because they have such a nice bookstore filled with very useful books, and in the university itself is very historical. Many thinkers have been and have studied here, and
well, practically everybody. Even I was here when that sounds like a century ago, and I had some really great professors. Dušan Pirivec, Dr. Cvirk. It was difficult to pass an exam with Dr. Cvirk because once he asked me, he called us candidates, you know. Candidate, are you determined? So, aste determinirani. And I said, well, it's difficult to say. I suppose in some ways I am, and in other ways perhaps I'm not. And he just pushed the index towards me across the desk and said, well, then come back when you will be certain whether you are or not. Goodbye.
wow, that's harsh. It's good though. It's good.
Today's professors of literature, I think, are nicer. Yeah, they're nicer. They're with one exception that I'm not going to mention by name, who is capable of really explosive behavior, throwing indexes down
Really?
the corridor after the departing students who
Wow.
was playing and so on. But apart from that, he's a very nice man and a great poet.
Oh,
So there you are. Good with the bad.
well, thank you again for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it, and I'd like to give a hand to Evald Flisar.
I'll just give my usual shrug and pretend that or just quote the title of one of my books, Tudi, yes, that is not me.
Thank you.
Thank you.